Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. There are fewer homeless people on the streets, but more inside shelters. This according to the latest report from the Regional Task Force on the Homeless. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has more.
The annual count conducted this past January shows a 6% overall drop in homelessness from last year, but
we still have a big problem out there facing the San Diego region.
Nearly 5,000 people were listed as unsheltered, an 11% decrease from last year.
But it's not a trend. It's a trend when we've done it 3 or 4 years in a row that we can say, okay, there's things. We got a lot to do.
Part of that work includes getting people off the streets, even if it's just temporary. The annual point-in-time count showed just over 3,500 people in shelters, a slight increase from last year. That is partially attributed to the addition of 3 tent shelters put up across San Diego.
They are interim solutions. They will not be around forever. They are expensive, but at least they're getting 700 people off of our streets today.
Last November, the Housing Commission decided to move $6.5 million earmarked for permanent housing to pay for those tents. To keep them up, it's expected to cost somewhere around $12 million next year.
We are trying to make sure that while we are not just focused on Band-Aid approaches and temporary solutions like big tents, that we are committed to housing first strategies that will solve homelessness.
Ward says the San Diego City Council will be reviewing that shelter investment next week. After some delays, a city-funded housing navigation center is expected to open in August. That's around the same time as a new downtown storage center for people to keep their belongings. This year's count also revealed veteran homelessness increased by nearly 300 people, a 24% jump from last year. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Ahead of these latest homeless count numbers released today, a lot of work has been done. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy walks through the streets of downtown with a city official who's in charge with dealing with the crisis.
Hello.
Anyone else who walks by a homeless person curled up in a sleeping bag on a downtown sidewalk might not see much hope, but Jonathan Herrera does.
I see a person that matters. I see my brother, I see my sister, an aunt, uncle, because that's who they are.
32-year-old Herrera is senior advisor on homelessness for the city of San Diego. Sporting a suit and tie with his shaved head and tattoo on his neck, Herrera has been on the front lines of the nation's 4th largest homeless crisis for 10 months now.
And how are you doing? What would you say the situation is now?
Right now, I would say we have put forth a significant amount of resources to get individuals off the street. Now our shift is going to be expanding housing opportunities.
He collaborates with groups and other regions on projects and solutions.
I'm glad they're taking care of you down at the shelter. That's good.
And he spends much of his time getting to know the people he's working to help.
And that was an element when I really stepped into this role that I saw that was missing. You know, there's a lot of stakeholders and service providers, well-intentioned advocates and things of that nature, but I didn't see homeless individuals being part of that conversation.
Herrera grew up in Southeast San Diego and Chula Vista. He says like those living on the streets, his road has not been easy. He took some bad turns after high school and got involved in gang activity.
I ended up in prison serving time for possession of firearms and narcotics.
Hitting rock bottom was his turning point.
I can remember sitting in a prison cell and thinking all the hard work my parents, my mother, her parents, really put forward to try to make a better life for me, and how I was just throwing that all away.
That's why he knows it's possible to turn people's lives around. He says he's found his calling.
It's been a crazy, crazy ride, but I'm absolutely honored to be able to serve my city in this fashion.
When he started in July, more than 1,100 people were sleeping on downtown streets, a stroll away from his City Hall office.
Well, 5,600 homeless individuals in the city of San Diego alone, 3,200 of them unsheltered.
Block after block of makeshift encampments overflowing in despair and misery. Hepatitis A spreading with no end in sight. Emergency shelter waiting lists stretching hundreds of names long.
So it was not only an increased population, it was far more visible. And the hepatitis A outbreak was, I believe, an opportunity for us to be able to take the action that was necessary. It was unfortunate that individuals lost their lives under this crisis.
A health crisis some blame on a lack of bathrooms.
Yes, the lack of sanitary facilities definitely contributed to it, and that's why the city stepped up in providing additional restrooms and has continued to provide those facilities after the outbreak has been rescinded.
Along with added porta potties came hand washing stations and sidewalk bleaching, followed by a major transformation on East Village streets. Police in large caravans spent months clearing out encampments and the people living in them.
I was one of the leading contributing factors to the unsanitary conditions that cause hepatitis A.
Advocates argue the aggressive enforcement pushed people to canyons and other hidden crevices, away from services they depend on.
Hello, anybody home?
Herrera says everyone was offered services and a bed, and the city set up new shelters for added capacity.
The campground, the bridge shelters, the safe parking program.
A temporary campground on the outskirts of downtown provided single and family tents for 200 people. Safe parking lots opened for people to sleep in their vehicles without worrying about citations. And 3 large tent structures called bridge shelters opened. They continue to provide beds for 700 people with the goal of moving them into permanent housing.
And they're really working with providing employment opportunities, supportive services, everything an individual needs to help transition from a life out on the streets.
Still, today, hundreds, if not thousands, are sleeping on the streets. Many are mentally ill or disabled, some just down on their luck.
It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And we're committed to being able to work with every individual to provide them an opportunity to get off the streets. Are we there yet? No.
But he says progress is being made. He says outreach and mental health treatment will be a major focus in the coming months with the help of a newly created neighborhood police division.
To provide a more comprehensive approach to how we engage homeless individuals.
The city is also opening more storage facilities for people to keep their belongings and a one-stop shop for homeless services in the East Village called a navigation center.
So here we are standing in front of the future Housing Navigation Center slated to open this summer. Tell me about this.
Yeah, this is really part of our overarching strategy to connect, support, and house homeless individuals.
Herrera says he knows what it's like to be faced with a series of closed doors, so he intends to open as many as he can and save lives.
In being able to help individuals completely turn their lives around.
Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
The San Diego County grand jury has released a report about the, quote, mishandling of the hepatitis A crisis. It includes some recommendations. KPBS reporter Jean Guerrero has the story.
The jury's report looked at what officials could have done better in the outbreak, which killed 20 and infected almost 600 people last year. Among the findings were these: that officials should declare a public health emergency sooner next time, establish clearer lines of authority, update the county's emergency operations plan to specify a command structure, and designate a project manager to communicate with city officials and medical personnel. The report also said officials should reinforce the county health officer's authority according to state law, designate a medical professional to report directly to the mayor, and construct and maintain more secure restrooms and hand-washing stations. I spoke to the jury's acting foreperson, Randall Sandstrom. He says the main takeaway is that delays in implementing life-saving programs like hand-washing stations and vaccinations could have been avoided through better communication between the city and the county.
So had that public health emergency been declared much sooner, it would have cleared barriers to get to people and vaccinate them sooner.
Earlier this week, the California State Assembly approved a request by Assemblyman Todd Gloria for a state audit of the response of the city and county to the outbreak. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
San Diego voters are in for a high-dollar contest this November over 2 competing Mission Valley Stadium measures. iNews Source reporter Leonardo Castaneda has more on the money the campaigns are raising.
It's 6 months before the November election, and already more than $7.3 million has been raised to spend on the 2 stadium ballot measures. The Soccer City proposal calls for the city to lease the 166-acre SDCCU stadium to FS investors. The developers would then build a soccer stadium, housing, retail shops, and a river park. Backers of the measure have raised about $3.7 million. Most of that has come from FS investors and other developers. Nick Stone with FS Investors says he likes Soccer City's chances.
And we're willing to kind of invest accordingly behind this proposal.
The second ballot measure, SDSU West, would let the city sell the stadium to San Diego State. The school would then build a smaller football stadium, housing, retail shops, and a river park. Friends of SDSU backs the measure and has raised about $1.6 million. A second group opposed to Soccer City has raised almost $2.1 million. Campaign consultant Tom Shepard works for both groups. He thinks they have a winning message.
Our people are contributing because they support the university and view this as critical to its future.
Friends of SDSU contributors include wealthy alumni, as well as some of the same developers opposing Soccer City. For KPBS, I'm my news reporter, Leonardo Castañeda.
San Diego voters are a few weeks away from choosing the county's next district attorney, and the race is growing more contentious. One candidate has launched a new website claiming supporting her opponent is a threat to public safety. KPBS reporter Taryn Minto digs into the claim.
Threat to SanDiego.com comes from the campaign for Summer Stephan. It says San Diego's public safety is under attack and points to a billionaire-backed committee's large financial support for Stephan's opponent, Deputy Public Defender Genevieve Jones-Wright. The website calls Jones-Wright the anti-law enforcement candidate and lists 6 reasons for this claim. The first, that she wants to end enforcement of sex crimes. And it points to this quote:
"You can't legislate morality."
Jones-Wright made the statement in a Facebook video. She was responding to Stephan's comments to Voice of San Diego that nearly all sex workers are victims.
There is a limited number of people that can say that they are choosing this as a way to make a living and that they don't have a pimp or a trafficker.
Jones-Wright was criticizing Stephan for citing anecdotal evidence over hard numbers that there's a limited number of voluntary sex workers.
It is very, very disturbing that she says they can't be quantified, but she takes this strong line and puts everyone into human trafficking. I'll tell you the problem that I have with that. The problem that I have with that is that you can't legislate morality. Some people voluntarily want to be sex workers, and you can't tell them that they didn't make a choice based on your own morals.
Voice's Scott Lewis asked Jones-Wright at a forum in late April if she felt any form of sex work should be legalized.
I'm not going to give my opinion on whether sex work should be legal or not. As of this moment, prostitution is against the law in the state of California, and I'll leave it at that.
The website also claims Jones-Wright wants to let human traffickers, pimps, and pedophiles recruit online. And it points to her quote, "I would prefer them to be on Craigslist and Backpage." A federal law recently gave authorities more power to prosecute websites such as Backpage.com, which featured listings connected to sex trafficking. Stephan supports the law and told Voice sites like Backpage emboldened people who pay for sex.
Men who would normally not buy sex feel a little bit of protection by not having to be out on the street picking up somebody on El Cajon Boulevard. They feel the anonymity of just going online and ordering a person like you're ordering pizza.
Jones-Wright says it takes away a tool that could help authorities.
So how much harder will it be for law enforcement to actually investigate and know who these people are if they're now not in the open? I would prefer for them to be on Backpage and Craigslist because we need to know who they are. If they are selling our children, if they are selling people who are not willing to be trafficked and that they're coerced into these things.
The website also says Jones-Wright wants to end bail and let dangerous criminals out of jail. It points to a Jones-Wright interview with the San Diego Union-Tribune editorial board. Jones-Wright says too many people who haven't yet been convicted of a crime are stuck in jail because they lack money for bail.
We don't need cash bail. We have other things that we can use to ensure, 1, that they'll come back to court, and 2, that they're not being dangerous on our streets.
A campaign representative says that includes a promise to reappear, electronic monitoring, or a supervised release program. Later in that Union Tribune interview, Jones-Wright says cash bail should still be an option, but it wouldn't be her default tactic if elected. Another claim is Jones-Wright lied on her ballot and was forced to change how she identified herself. It is true that she was ordered to change her designation from public defender/commissioner to deputy public defender. Jones-Wright is on San Diego's Gang Commission, but a petitioner argued that role is not her primary profession. The website also says Jones-Wright will only enforce laws she agrees with and wants to close prisons and let dangerous criminals walk the streets. To learn what we found out about these claims and for more details about the others we've discussed, go to kpbs.org. Taryn Minto, KPBS News.
KPBS producer Michael Lipkin also contributed to that piece. Should teenagers vote in school board elections? A committee for San Diego Unified says the question should go before voters. KPBS education reporter Megan Burke says that's despite finding weak support for the idea.
The volunteer committee has recommended the San Diego Unified School Board ask voters in November whether 16 and 17-year-olds can vote in school board elections. The recommendation is in direct opposition to the committee's own survey, which found nearly 70% of respondents were against the idea. The committee also recommended pursuing term limits for trustees, which a majority of survey respondents did want. Brett Kezlavka has been pushing for school board election reform and had this to say.
It was clearly intent to distract from the issues at hand.
A recent grand jury report criticized district elections but said nothing about voting age. Trustees Richard Barrera and Sharon Whitehurst Payne added it to the committee's plate. The trustees are expected to vote on the recommendations later this month. The city council would then have to approve them before a proposal lands on the November ballot. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, tough talk on trade. President Trump admonishes China as another round of trade talks begin. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
San Diego Zoo researchers have successfully used artificial insemination to get a southern white rhino pregnant. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson says the development is considered a key stepping stone in the zoo's efforts to help revive the critically endangered northern white rhinos.
Victoria, a southern white rhino, lumbers through a heavy iron gate on the San Diego Zoo Safari Park. She's looking for a treat and a friendly pat from senior keeper Jill Van Kempen. The white rhino is here for a checkup. It's something that postdoctoral researcher Parker Pennington first noticed several weeks ago.
Too much? Other way.
Pennington manipulates an ultrasound wand while the zoo's reproductive physiologist Barbara Durant studies the portable ultrasound screen.
She has grown a lot. We're calling her she, we're hopeful.
She's looking at an embryo. Durant says that little baby rhino is just short of 2 months old.
If you look at the screen, you can see the fetus. And we just did a crown rump measurement. This is the head, and this is the body. And when I unfreeze it, you'll be able to see the heartbeat.
Victoria gets an ultrasound like this once a week, and that already makes this baby one of the most watched rhino embryos ever.
So she's on her head is down.
The baby rhino is about 37 millimeters long, about 1.33 inches.
And then this is her body.
Think the length of a typical AA battery. Durant also uses a Doppler feature of the ultrasound machine to see if the blood is flowing like it should.
This is the fetus here, this is the body, this is the head. And see that little round white spot? That's the bottom of one of her feet. Those are her 2 feet there up next to her head.
And so when we see these little explosions of color, the blue and the red, that's the blood.
That's blood flow, yes.
Durant and Pennington have tried artificial insemination with another rhino, but this pregnancy is the first to work using the techniques developed here. Special tools had to be designed to navigate the tricky birth canal. Protocols were developed for freezing sperm so material remains capable of fertilization. And delivering the sperm at the right time is key. Victoria got pregnant on the first try, and Pennington says that's because there was a viable egg.
We tracked that ovary, induced her ovulation, and made sure that it happened before we inseminated her because of the frozen sperm that we were using. We wanted to make sure that it was a successful ovulation.
Victoria is one of 6 female rhinos that were brought to San Diego from South Africa to help develop these artificial insemination techniques.
It's amazing how quick all of this happened from these females coming in from the wild and being trained, and now we have a pregnancy from an artificial insemination in just a little over 2 years. It's awesome.
Durant says the team is focused on making sure each of them become a mom because that will be the key to helping their critically endangered cousins, the northern white rhinos. Only 2 of them remain on the planet, and neither are capable of breeding.
in the long run, in the very distant future, when we are able to do embryo transfer and we have a northern white rhino embryo and we can put it into a southern white rhino for gestation, we'll be able to follow those same landmarks of growth and development.
This is not Victoria's first pregnancy. She was carrying a rhino calf when she was brought to San Diego. That was a surprise. Senior keeper Jill Van Kempen says the birth was dramatic, but also sad because the infant was stillborn.
We kind of have to take a step back and trust Mother Nature. And, you know, Rhino's a big animal and she's protective, so we can't really get hands-on to help her or to help that baby very often. So we sort of just have to let nature take its course.
Nature's course isn't being relied upon for conception. San Diego researchers are giving the rhinos a big push to improve the odds of fertilization. And in 14 months or so, they'll find out if the successful procedure leads to more pregnant moms or even a healthy calf on the ground. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
The next few days will get a bit colder and windy in some areas. Jeff Cornish has the forecast.
Well, good Thursday evening to all of you. It's a little breezy out there tonight, and it will be increasingly windy into the mountains. Cooler weather prevails for most of us, and there may be just a little bit of patchy drizzle into the morning hours. Won't be a widespread issue. Satellite and radar, we have to zoom out to find anything worth really mentioning, and they are showers up near and north of Reno, Nevada. So we're going to be generally quiet tonight. Otherwise, it will be breezy. Increasing clouds, lows around 60 degrees. Those low clouds will invade once again. And as we step into the overnight forecast, windy out there at Borrego Springs, 61 the low there. Mount Laguna around 44. Friday, cool air continues to come on with that onshore breeze. Spotty showers stay hundreds of miles away to our north. We're on track for a high right around 67 in San Diego and into Ramona about 70 degrees. Borrego Springs, the heat is on there at 91. The weekend forecast holds on to the dry, pleasant, somewhat cool weather for us. So as we look at the specific details, I'll step aside. The coastal forecast, some low clouds, maybe a little bit of very spotty drizzle in a few mornings into Friday and Saturday, but then that trend will probably decrease. Inland forecast, low to mid-70s. We get a little cooler again into Tuesday, back to 70 degrees. Into the mountains we go with temperatures a little cool Friday into the mid-60s Saturday and Sunday. Keep in mind it'll be windy out there tonight. Into the mountains, a brief shower possible by Tuesday. And into the deserts we go with highs in the low 90s and then slightly cooler mid-80s by Tuesday. I'm meteorologist Jeff Cornish for KPBS News. Back to you, Ebony.
After years of debate over its controversial mascot, San Diego State University says it's keeping the Aztec warrior. Outgoing President Sally Rausch says it's will be redesigned to be more culturally sensitive and be more of a spiritual leader than a mascot. Rausch's decision was informed by a 17-member task force of students, faculty, staff, and alumni, and other members. The task force was put together after SDSU's Senate recommended retirement for the mascot in February. Well, it's Bike to Work Day in San Diego, and several staffers cycled to KPBS this morning. Video journalist Katie Shulov recorded her 6-mile ride from North Park and talked to other cyclists along the way.
I think the last time I was on a bike was when I was like 12 years old.
Kelsey Edelstein is nervous, just like I was, commuting for the first time in a decade this morning.
I'm feeling really nervous. It's my first time ever biking, like on the road, sharing with cars, so I'm pretty scared.
Edelstein is riding from her Normal Heights home to work in Bankers Hill. What got her back on the bike?
For the free t-shirt.
I got my own Bike to Work shirt at one of more than 100 pit stops set up in San Diego Thursday morning, where they also gave out free snacks and bike tune-ups.
It kind of seems silly to be driving and, driving around looking for parking, even when I get to work. It's bad for the atmosphere, and it's a lot better for my body to be biking.
The city has been working to make cycling easier for people like Edelstein. One of the latest additions, new high-visibility bike lanes in Hillcrest, added earlier this month.
If we could get more people to ride to work, we can get more bike lanes, and then maybe less cars.
Regina Choi rides from La Mesa to work at San Diego State almost every day, including Bike to Work Day, because she says it saves her the 30-plus minutes she used to spend searching for parking.
And I pull right up to my classroom, and so that's why I bike as well, because otherwise it takes me almost like 45 minutes from a 10-minute bike ride.
The city's climate action plan expects 6% of commute trips in transit priority areas to be made by bike by 2020. Katie Shulev, KPBS News.
Now, here's a look at what we are working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom on Morning Edition. She's about to go royal. The world gets ready to watch Prince Harry and Meghan Markle tie the knot. And on Midday Edition, tips on where you can watch the royal wedding in San Diego. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.